Welcome to Nobilis Erotica, episode 325. I am your host, Nobilis Reed.
Hey, this is Oscar the Grouch, Private Eye, from Polly Cooley's The Street. Nobilis Erotica is for adults only. It may contain adult language, situations, and lots of rumpy-pumpy. So if you're not an adult, scram!
This episode of Nobilis Erotica is sponsored by Circlet Press, the world's leading publisher of erotic science fiction and fantasy since 1992. Celebrate the erotic imagination with them at circlet.com. Greetings, noble listeners. I am back from Balticon and I have some great stuff coming up for you. There's all kinds of nifty audio, including dirty Mad Libs and erotica readings and all kinds of great stuff. But first, I have a Circlet Press story for you from author Michael M. Jones. This is Runic, Runaway. This story appears in the single-author anthology Puck's Hill by Night, lesbian erotic urban fantasy, available from Circlet Press. Michael blames his love of urban fantasy on Charles DeLint, Emma Bull, and Pamela Dean, and his love of speculative erotica on Francesca Leah Block, Teresa Noel Roberts, and Cecilia Tan. He reserves some of the blame for his wife as well, who serves as half cheerleading section, half sounding board. He also blames his cats. You can find his website at michaelmjones.com. It's read for us by Tia Towns, a fabulous voice we've had here before. Oh, and coupon codes are back. Listen through to the end for a big discount on Puck's Hill by Night. Here we go.
The Runic, Runaway. Written by Michael M. Jones. Narrated by Miss Tia Towns. The nice thing about working the night manager shift at the Starlight Motel is that very little happens after hours. The bad part is that, well, very little happens after hours. I can kill time with paperwork and office cleanup. My daytime counterpart is a horrible slob, but after that, I get a lot of reading done. I know every late-night radio show by heart, from Peregrine's Perch, classic rock hosted by a guy who's been stoned since Woodstock, to Phoebe Masters' moonlit classical review. I've taken up and abandoned needlework, crosswords, Sudoku, and origami. My current obsession is solitaire with a real deck of cards. In the long, quiet, dark hours of the night, you take such amusements as you can, always wondering what will happen to break up the monotony. The Starlight Motel is located in a not-so-charming part of Puck's Hill on Bishop Boulevard, just before it heads across the Grace River Bridge into Covenant, which some call a suburb, some call a sister city, but all agree is a much worse place to be in general. We're about as far out and down as you can get and still be Puck's Hill. We are cheap, discreet, and don't ask awkward questions. The folks that rent rooms, free local calls, AC, and heating, and HBO tend to be desperate, on the run, on the skids, or out of options. Like me once upon a time. It was just past midnight on a breezy Tuesday in mid-September. I was looking for a home for the Five of Hearts, seriously considering a little innocent cheating, when a bell chimed to announce a visitor. I glanced up expecting to see a guest looking for the ice machine, but the woman framed by the door was unfamiliar. Long experience allowed me to take her measure before she half crossed the lobby. You never know when you'll be describing someone for the cops. Short and slender, she moved with nervous grace and underlying wariness. Dressed in worn sneakers, faded blue jeans, and what looked to be a black long-sleeve turtleneck under a red hoodie. Only her head and hands were bare. Glossy black hair fell to frame pale skin and arguably Chinese features. She was young, barely an adult, and I recognized the haunted look in her dark brown eyes. She was 5 steps ahead of trouble, and one step away from disaster. I swept the cards into a pile, putting them aside, while giving the woman my most welcoming smile. "Evening," I said. "Welcome to the Starlight Motel. What can I do for you?" "A room, please." Her voice was soft, without a trace of accent. Definitely a local girl. I rattled off our rates. "Cash or plastic," I added, already knowing her choice. Wincing, she dug into a pocket and produced a thin handful of cash. She counted it out in ones and fives, laying the last bill down with a sad sense of finality. There was nothing left to go back into her pockets. I gave her a sympathetic look, but nothing more. I'd been burned by fake sob stories in the past, enough to keep my guard up. I took the money, exchanging it for a card. "Just need some basic information on here. Fill this out, initial the rate, sign it. Usual paperwork." I put the money in the register while she filled out the card. I knew it would be full of half-truths and outright lies. I'd have been surprised otherwise. You don't come to the Starlight if you want to be yourself. When she slid it back to me, she left as much as possible blank and listed herself as Trixie Wheeler? I looked up, eyebrow quirked, turning her name into a question. Her skin flushed as she lowered her gaze to avoid mine. I was right. She was no Trixie. I shook my head. "Hun, in the past few weeks, I've had 3 Michelle Obamas, a Martha Stewart, several Amy Winehouses, and I don't know how many James Smiths. It's nice to see someone with some creativity." I smiled warmly. "Nice to meet you, Trixie Wheeler. I'm Joanna Haven. If there's anything I can do for you while you're here, just let me know." She lifted her eyes. The haunted look was briefly replaced by gratitude. "I'll be okay," she said. She took the key I offered, turning to head for the door and for the room I assigned her. "Hey, Trixie," I surprised myself by calling after her. Every single time I won't get involved, I say. Every single time I break that promise. She paused to look back. "You hungry?" It's about time I took a break. I read the conflict in her expression. "It's on me." That got me a quick nod. "Please. Thank you." At some point, she judged me and found me acceptable. That's usually how it is with me. I took a moment to set up the forwarding system on our phones so any incoming calls would go straight to my cell. It was a stab at modernizing the Starlight's ancient infrastructure. I'd pushed for the change when it became clear I'd be the only person responding at night and couldn't always be at the office. I put up the sign further directing any visitors to call my number for assistance, locked up the money, and stood. "You might have noticed the diner on the other side of the motel," I said. "They're cheap, quick, pretty tasty at this time of night. Theo, their cook, does a wicked Eggs Benedict." "That sounds lovely," Trixie maintained her reserve, choosing her words as carefully as her movements, glancing around in anticipation of a surprise attack. As I joined her, she blatantly studied me. My immediate thought was, I hope I pass muster. I'm tall and curvy, with a little extra padding in all the right places. My job doesn't lend itself to a lot of physical activity. I work hard to stay in shape. My Minnesota Swede father and African-American mother passed down an interesting blend of genetics. Enough so that people will have trouble pinging on me on my first meeting. My hair is a tangle of brown curls, usually kept tied back out of sheer necessity and practicality. People say I have an understanding look and comfortable features. Damned if I know what that's supposed to mean. It usually means friend rather than object of desire. something I occasionally regret on the longer, lonelier nights. As usual, when working, I was in jeans and a sweatshirt. The Starlight Motel's not one for a dress code, and there's no one to impress. With Trixie's gaze on me, though, I felt a sudden urge to primp. Pride, perhaps, or the stirrings of a much-neglected libido, which hadn't gotten the message that strays like Trixie were off-limits as far as I was concerned. It didn't help that she was a good 10 years younger than me, either. With that sort of a difference, I'm more likely to mother them than date them. I shoved aside that train of thought, escorting Trixie to the Whistleberry Diner. She did a double take at the name, and I shrugged. Back in the day, they specialized in bean dishes. Time and owners change, but the name lives on. The Whistleberry is ancient as diners go. Has been around since the dawn of time, serving up hot food at cheap prices. It's no frills, with everyone treated with the same mixture of casual disdain and neighborhood familiarity. The last time it closed, even for a day, was in 1987 for a family funeral. It was like my second home after the Starlight. Even at this time of night, there were a few other patrons. Most of them were at the counter, lost in coffee and newspapers, and their own thoughts. We opted for a table. It took a few minutes, but we finally got some help. He was tall and skeletal thin, all in black save for the incongruous red and white apron they all wore here. With the elaborate Celtic knot tattoos running up his bare arms and enough facial piercings to set off an airport metal detector, he was the antithesis of the stereotypical diner waitress. "Tam," I greeted him. "Joe." I wouldn't say he brightened to see me, but his posture went from deathly bored to vaguely alert. "New friend?" He jerked his head towards Trixie. "I hope so. Start us off with some coffee while we decide." Tam took care of that. Trixie remained silent while he returned, left again, her hands folded neatly on the table. She kept her eyes lowered, more to avoid mine than out of any real modesty. When the menu came, she skimmed it for a long moment. Again, I saw indiscretion. I remembered her. "I'm buying. And I won't go broke on what they charge here." That was that. Soon she was digging into a massive combination breakfast. Eggs, bacon, toast, sausage, grits, and all the good old standards. After singing its praises earlier, I naturally went for the Eggs Benedict. We ate in comfortable silence, Trixie devouring her meal like a locust. Eventually she slowed down. Looking up from her ravaged plate, she met my neutral expression and finally asked the question I was expecting. "What do you want?" "Not a thing," I told her honestly. "It's nice to have someone new to talk to now and again, but there's no debt between us. You're free to go at any time." Trixie nodded. "Good." She ran a bit of toast through some egg yellow on her plate, nervously considering her options. Spill her secrets or keep them safe. We were now in the moment when things could go any which way. "However," I said, "if you're in trouble, I might be able to help. If you're trying to get out of a bad situation, I know of shelters and safe places. I can point to you at people who listen and understand, or cops who take you seriously. Or I can loan you money for a bus ticket." I dangled the information between us, let it sit while I stirred some sugar into my coffee. A minute went by. 2. I pointedly looked anywhere but at Trixie while she continued her internal debate. "It's not like that." She broke the silence with a thin, awkward admission. I'm not sure who can help, who to trust, how far I can or should run. Her eyes were wide, dark, and heartbreakingly lonely as they caught mine for a second. I have a lot of friends, I replied gently. Some of them are used to really exotic problems. This time I made sure to capture her gaze, letting her read my expression and my intent. You're free to walk away, Trixie. You have your room for the night, and in the morning you can move on. Do whatever you planned, if you had a plan. I paused, shrugging. Or take a chance and let me do what I can. But why? I'm a sucker for strays, I said honestly. I try to make the world better one person at a time. Someone comes to the Starlight with the look you have in your eyes. I'd never forgive myself if I didn't at least give them a new set of options. The pause this time was long enough for Tam to come by, refill our coffee, take away our dishes, and leave the bill with a pointed look I ignored. He was a really nice kid, just a little rough around the edges. I'd helped him out of a bad spot, and now I was one of his favorite people, for what little it was worth. I tipped him well for the time we spent here. Trixie fiddled with a straw wrapper before making the next move. I don't know why I'm running, or from whom. 3 weeks ago, I woke up in an alley, hiding behind some trash cans, clutching a duffel bag of my belongings. Every time I think of going home, some instinct screams at me, tells me to stay away, to run, to hide, to stay off the grid. Her knuckles turned white as she clenched her fist. Her eyes had that trapped animal look to them, and she glanced towards the street. I've been on the move ever since. At night here, a night there. I had a wad of cash in my pocket along with my credit cards and debit cards cut up. Her smile was quick, bitter. I'm not sure if I did it or if someone did it for me. I gave her my full attention, projecting every ounce of sympathy I could. You don't have any idea what happened? Not a thing. I mean, I know who I am. I know that I graduated from Tuesday University last year. I know where I live and where to find my family, but she slashed a hand in the air. It's like someone tore out bits and pieces of my past, and even thinking about it gives me headaches. Even now my instincts are going apeshit, telling me to get moving again. My brow furrowed. It sounds like some sort of post-traumatic disorder. Were you... I cut off the question as she shook her head. Untouched? Not a scratch, bruise, or sign of assault on me. I wish that comforted me, because what I did discover was far weirder. The tattoos. At my curious head tilt, she sighed. She rolled up one sleeve and then the other as far as the elbows. Unfamiliar runes danced along her skin, following curves and muscles organically. They came in a multitude of colors, almost alive in their richness. They continued under her sleeves. Sweet ink, Tam said, passing by to check on us. Trixie gasped, hiding the runic tattoos once again. Oh, sorry. Twitchy much? He sniffed, moving on. Impressive, I said. Beautiful. What do they mean? Trixie's expression was bittersweet and forlorn. I wish I knew. They tingle. Often I think they're whispering to me in a language I only know in my dreams. Sometimes they freeze, other times they almost burn. They glow in the dark, shimmer in the light, and when I'm not looking, they sometimes change shape or direction. No tattoo artist in town will take credit for them, and a few of them threw me out just for asking. She shrugged, as if shifting the weight of the world on her shoulders. I didn't even know what to say. This is so far from my usual problems. I didn't even know where to start. My silence stretched into the awkward range. Finally, what else can you tell me? Not a damn thing. Something within me wants to flee, but something else is keeping me in Puck's Hill. I've been pinballing across the city for weeks, trying to dampen my flight instincts long enough to learn something, anything. And I'm out of money, out of energy, out of hope. I know without a shadow of a doubt that someone or something is coming for me, but not when or where or what or why. Her eyes shone with frustration. So tell me how you can help me. It was a plaintive demand. She expected rejection. I wondered if she extended her trust elsewhere, only to find laughter or disbelief. Sometimes even once is too much. Or had paranoia's claw dug so deep into her that only I, with my trust me face and demeanor, could aid her. I placed my hands on her, stilling its compulsive movements. I felt her relax under my touch. Trixie, I told her, I don't know exactly what I can do, but I'm confident I can help. I released her hands and took the bill. Let's get back to the Starlight. We can plan better there. I paid, earning a nod of grudging thanks and see you next time from Tam, and we left. Trixie leapt from her seat as if glad to be on the move again. Back at the Starlight, I checked on the office just to make sure nothing had blown up, caught on fire, been vandalized, or otherwise gone haywire. All was as I had left it. There were some nights when I didn't even need to be there. I escorted Trixie to my room. I occupy a suite of 2 rooms, located next door to the office. Once they were units 1 and 2, but I'd been in them so long that they just ceased to have separate identities, and were just mine. Neither were very large. Unit 1 served as a living room where I entertained the rare visitor or stray, while 2 was my bedroom and personal space. I'd supplemented the usual crappy motel furniture with some secondhand pieces and local art, as well as assorted knickknacks and personal possessions. With the bright tapestries on the walls and overflowing bookcase wedged into one corner and other tokens of my existence, it was just like home. I ushered Trixie in, shutting the door behind us and locking it. I shed my sweatshirt, tossing it over the back of a chair. Underneath, I was wearing a simple gray tank top, comfy but hardly fashionable, and it showed off a little more of my figure that I'd rarely planned. Screw it, I'd manage. Trixie was standing awkwardly in the middle of the room, so I waved a hand. Make yourself comfortable. Trixie perched on the very edge of the couch, wringing her hands. I went over to the bookshelf and ran my fingertips over the leather spines on the top row where I kept my more esoteric finds. Beneficent Charms, Wicked Beast of the Night, The Gaslight District, and Oral History, The Unspoken Mysteries. They'd come to me one at a time, gifts from those I'd helped, and serendipitous finds in used bookstores. When it came to magical things, I was a rank amateur and untrained dabbler. But knowledge was power. I took down Alderman's Ritual, Secrets, and Cunning Lore, a thick book which threatened to fall apart in my hands, making a mental note to get it fixed someday. Gingerly, I flipped through it, first to the index, then to the sections near the middle, minding the pages ready to fly free. With a nod, I walked over to show it to Trixie. What do you think? The page I held open for her inspection were filled with a tight, barely legible script on one side, a passable sketch of a human figure on the other. The figure bore tattoos much like the ones I'd seen on Trixie's arms, though differing in the final design. Her eyes flew open wide with recognition. She snatched the book from my hand before giving me an apologetic look, her grip turning delicate. "This is them!" she exclaimed. She began to read, sliding a finger over the pages as she puzzled out the faded words. Aliolingua, the personal language. According to this, we're all born with our own secret language. Unique words, syllables, and phrases which define us intimately. We know it as infants, but it fades as we grow up and learn to communicate with the rest of the world. Maybe 1 in a million knows even a word of their personal language, most not even that. She paused, shivering, rubbing at an arm. This sounds so familiar. I knew this. There was a spell. A way to decipher my Aliolingua, to draw it forth from my soul and inscribe it on my skin. Blood and ink and power. She looked back at the page, flipping it to read on. To harness innate energy to control and exploit and master someone and their potential. She shuddered. I rescued the book before she could drop it. Alderman's Rituals is some damn spooky piece of work, I admitted, but it's amazing what you can find in it. Someone stumbled across a copy years ago and actually put it online. Copies vanish almost as quickly as they appear, but once something's on the internet, it's like a roach. I had a feeling that we'd be finding a beginning to our answers here. Trixie nodded, fingers laced together tightly. It's like a crack in the door, she murmured. Someone used me, but they didn't finish the job, did they? I skimmed this section and shook my head. The full process involves the face and hands as well, to claim dominion over the senses and establish full mastery of the subject. In other words, if they complete the ritual, you're little more than a meat puppet, dancing under the commands. Gods, what a mess. Just enough to keep me from running away. I struggled, I fought, I fled, and somehow in the process I tore my memories open like a new stitched wound. Thoughts bleeding all over the sidewalk. My enemy's identity lost. There's more, I said. Not much, but... She nodded, I went on. The subject may still be controlled through intimate contact to stir the mind, inflame the senses, and raise the power. Trixie's expression shifted from sour to thoughtful as something sparked in her eyes. There was a woman, she whispered. Fingers sweeping over me, an electric touch, her mouth on my skin. Where she kissed me, I blazed to life. My blood boiled with desires. I loved her and she did this to me. My own muscles tensed as Trixie's words conjured up a dangerously tempting image. My long ignored libido shifted, stirred like a snake on a sun-warmed rock. I forced myself to breathe easy, to ignore the thought of Trixie caught up in passion in the throes of orgasm. I closed the book with little more force than necessary. We both jumped a little at the sound. The mood was broken. Nervously, we glanced around and back at one another. I have a thought, I said. It was a bad idea. Scratch that. A horrible idea. And yet, what alternatives were there? To stir the mind, inflame the senses, and raise the power? Trixie asked, as if reading my thoughts. Her lips twitched in a soft, wry, bitter smile before her expression hardened. She was pulling away from me again. Hold on, I said, hands up in a reassuring protest. I promise you, I don't want your magic. I don't want to use you. Honestly, it's about the last thing I want. I don't need anything more than I have here and now, I swear. I gave her a moment to think about it. I'm just exploring our options. I know people who could fight for you, who could fight your mystery woman and turn her into chopped chutney just for blinking funny. They could send her packing, or they could leave her a drooling vegetable. The problem is, it takes time to get in touch with some of them, while calling on others would incur a debt neither of us are eager to pay. I can do it, though. Say the words and this can all go away. I'm sure one of them could also restore your memory. Or I can trust you and we could do this together, asked Trixie. She sounded hopeful, leaning forward to give me a look mostly free of suspicion. I've dealt with my fair share of things that go bump in the night. If we work as a team... It didn't explain any further. I had certain rules that kept me sane and relatively content at the end of the night. I only helped those willing to accept it. I didn't solve their problems for them. I gave them whatever tools they needed to make the next step. A phone number, a bus ticket, a safe place for the night, an introduction. That sort of thing. I knew that the best kind of success was the sort you were willing to achieve on your own. If Trixie really wanted her freedom, she'd need to do it herself, not have someone else come in guns blazing. I gave her the choice, and you're right. It makes sense. Trixie shrugged out of her hoodie, dropping it to the ground. She grabbed the hem of her turtleneck and paused. I haven't let anyone else see me like this, that I know of. Want me to look away? I offered. That provoked a laugh from her. You'll be seeing it all soon enough. Talk to me. Distract me. Why do you do this? Helping people, living in a shithole motel while giving aid and comfort to people like me. I couldn't even take umbrage at her dismissal of the Starlight. It was really a shithole. Unapologetically so. I leaned back against my chair, keeping my gaze neutral, while I found my beginning. It all goes back to high school. I was much younger and stupider. I slept with the guy I loved and was 7 months pregnant when I graduated. We got married and thought we'd do okay. Trixie pulled the turtleneck over her head, displaying the plain white bra underneath. The runes covered her from wrist to neck, tracing curves and vanishing under the fabric of the bra. There was an alien, exotic manner in how they outlined her body, how they drew out her very essence. On her own, she was attractive, slim, well-toned, with pale skin and small breasts, but in a girl-next-door sort of way. The tattoos transformed her and set her apart. She saw the look in my eyes and froze, self-conscious. I quickly continued. When Alexandria was 5, I fell in love with a woman for the first time. Well, that's a long story in its own right. It took me a while to work through everything, to tell myself the truth that I was bisexual but really preferred girls. Samuel, my husband, took it badly when I tried to talk to him about it. I refused to change just to keep him. I refused to deny who I was. He demanded a divorce and got one. His family, who never liked me, was able to afford a much better lawyer. He got everything, including my baby girl. The memories still hurt as raw as though they happened yesterday. As I let my sob story unfold, Trixie shucked her shoes and slithered out of her pants, revealing panties that matched the bra. Much worn, often washed, clearly at the end of their lifespan. The runes wrapped around her hips and legs, ran down her thighs and calves, and ended at the ankles. I took a deep breath, trying to ignore the stirrings of desire within. I could have fought them even then. It's not like being a lesbian was enough to lose custody, except Samuel's family had the judge in their pocket as well. I was in a pretty bad place, spiraling downward in a hurry. I let them win and fell apart. Eventually, with nowhere else to go, I ended up here, exchanging cleaning work for a room. Then the night manager spot opened up and I pressed for it. Got it to my surprise and been here ever since. I've made a new life for myself. It's not perfect, but I'm happy. And when someone crosses my path, hurting and alone and needing that single bright moment of darkness in their life, I try to give it to them. Trixie unhooked her bra and let it fall from her arms, exposing her tattooed breasts. Her nipples were dark and erect, standing out against the runes which entirely circled them. She stepped out of her underwear, and I noticed she was shaved bare, with runes reaching between her legs as if drawing power from her female center. For a brief, giddy second, I saw her as an outline of a woman, rendered in all silver lines, lacking just the head and extremities to be whole. I blinked, and she was back to normal again. Exposed, vulnerable yet strong, she held herself still like a classic statue. Her dark eyes bored into mine, lips half open as a thought balanced on the edge. What she said then surprised me. You know what, Joanna? You sound lonely. What? Trixie took several steps in my direction, delicate and purposeful. Here I am, scared shitless, worried for my sanity and my freedom, running for life, and you're a candle in the dark, and yet you sound so lonely inside. Mothering other people, helping strays, taking on their problems. It's like you're trying to fill the void left by the loss of your family, but in a way that doesn't require actual commitment. What? I repeated, brain stuck in neutral. I wasn't sure what I expected from Trixie, but a cutting analysis wasn't it. I learned a few things in college, she said, lips half quirked in a faint smile. I remember that part. She came to rest in front of me. Taking my hands, she tugged me to my feet. I believe you don't want to use me. I see how you look at me, attracted but hiding it, refusing to think of me as a way to gain power. But you were right. We don't have time for propriety or delicate sensibilities. We can't hold back. She placed my right hand on her hip and my left over her heart. The runes underneath shone electric warm to the touch, my fingers tingling. As the power stirred to life, she tilted her head up, whispering, Please enjoy this, Joanna. I'm giving myself to you. Her eyes were filled with a longing. She wanted the moment as much as I suddenly did. Our lips met in a slow, soft kiss, and her body melded to mine, her slight frame nestled against my generous curves. Instinct took over, my fingers sliding over bare skin, flowing with the lines and twists of the runes. Silver light gleamed as each in turn activated. Runes ablazed along her sides, her waist, her rear, and in the full length of her spine. Following the path of my hands, her lips parted to invite a deeper kiss. I accepted gladly, tongues teasing hers in a playful dance. I breathed in a scent uniquely hers, one escaping words, and my head swam. She laced her arms around my waist, holding me to her as if I'd be going anywhere at this point. Breathless, we broke apart after several long minutes of kissing and touching. For this to work, she gasped, cheeks flushed and eyes bright, you need to be naked also. The more skin-to-skin contact, the better. There was logic, and I couldn't argue with. She tucked her hands under my tank top, drawing it up and over my breast, tugging it off altogether. Her touch was invigorating, my nerves blazing in her wake. It had been a long time since any woman, touched me like that. I almost didn't notice when she unclasped my bra and encouraged me out of it. My breasts spilled free, lush and heavy, aching with long-denied needs, and she soothed them with gentle touches and light kisses. The moans escaping my lips brought a true smile from her. That was enough to spark me to life. Together, we shed the rest of my clothes, letting them fall where they might. Together, we stumbled through the connecting door and into my so-called bedroom. I barely had time to be grateful I'd cleaned up recently before we fell onto the bed with the clash of springs and laughter. Neither of us were holding back. Sparks flew, literally. As I explored Trixie's body with hands and mouth, the runes gleamed brighter and harder, their energy streaming into me with every point of contact. I was charged, electrified, empowered, overflowing. She encouraged me with moans and whimpers, pushing herself against me, fingers raking along my sides. I realized just how much of her guarded demeanor had been an act. Her passion was burning it all away. How could I not respond to that? How could I not give as good as I got? As her legs parted, I followed the runes with my fingertips, seeking the source of her arousal, of her warmth. A low cry of approval slipped from her lips, her hips arching upwards in blatant offering. I stroked her, finding her slick, hot, and ready. When my fingers entered her, she gasped, tensing around them, trying to hold on to me tight. We rocked together as I alternately fingered her and rubbed her clit, coaxing her into a very real, very powerful orgasm. The power exploded out of her, soaked up by my body rushing out of her sex and through my fingers into my core. The sheer pressure of the magic as it found its home in me was enough to disorient me. In that moment, Trixie seized the opportunity to get the upper hand. Before I knew it, her lips were blazing a trail over my breast, tongue flicking over super sensitive nipples, leaving them taut and aching as she moved onwards. Slender fingers moved with experience and purpose over my skin, stroking and caressing. I stretched out on the bed, understanding that this was as much for her as for me, in a way of recapturing something she lost before she ever met me. My nerves tingled. My body blazed. And every touch left me wet and wanting more. She rubbed herself against me, breast brushing against mine, leaving me all but helpless under her attentions. By the time she buried her face between my legs, I was lost in a sea of sensation. Her tongue teased, tormented, tasted me with long strokes and quick flickers, keeping me on the edge for long moments. Then she shoved me over the edge into an earth-shattering, mind-searing, annihilating, and remaking me in the space of a second. When I returned to my senses, I was sweat-soaked, shivering and saturated with magical power. Moreover, I had knowledge that I hadn't before. I looked at Trixie, and I knew her. I saw her soul and the collection of choices that made her. It about made me weep for the strange beauty that was humanity. I knew how to cast curses and charms, spells and hexes. I instinctively understood how to change reality with the crook of a finger and the utterance of a syllable. It terrified me. I wasn't meant for such things. I didn't trust myself in the power and the responsibility. I wanted to give it back, immediately. Then I met Trixie's eyes. I saw the hope and trust she placed in me. She hadn't opened herself up to me. She'd given me everything. I'd become her champion. More importantly, she knew herself. I saw things flickering behind her eyes and in her mind. A cascade of memories, a kaleidoscope of images, a multitude of realizations. I kissed her, slow and soft, holding myself to her lips, and then forehead to forehead. Trixie spoke, her words tickling forth, hesitant at first, but then with more confidence. Eleanor. She was my roommate all throughout college, and my lover. I was young and foolish, and on my own for the first time, and she was dynamic and exciting, and everything I ever thought I wanted. I felt Trixie's rush of freedom, her intense joy at understanding who she was and what she wanted. I felt the intoxication of love and the whirlpool of desire, and knew exactly how Trixie had drowned it in. She introduced me to all sorts of things, including magic, and I went along with everything she suggested because I loved her, and I didn't think any better of it. Trixie looked past me, seeing everything she'd forgotten. I came out to my family when I was a junior. They didn't take it well. I didn't have any other real friends. Eleanor saw to that. God, she spent 4 years isolating me, conditioning me, turning me into a tool. She shrugged against me, and I held her close while she composed herself again. I saw the shadow of Eleanor looming large over Trixie, and I understood what manner of person she was. Her sort always excelled at doing nasty things to others. I knew something was wrong near the end. I found out what she'd planned. I ran, but fighting her control took its toll on my memory in the process. I've been running ever since. She bolted upright, eyes wide. She's coming. I can feel her plucking at my strings. Something wicked this way comes. Instinctively, I understood that Eleanor had come in response to our ritual. Feeling Trixie's power through their arcane connection, my solution had hastened the confrontation. But this was my territory. We held the advantage, I hope. She climbed out of bed, dressing in hasty silence. Let's go tell your ex it's over, I said. Trixie flashed me a quick, thank you smile. I squeezed her hand for comfort before we exited into the parking lot. Eleanor was almost disappointing in her lack of menace. She was of average height, a stocky, short-haired brunette with pale skin and icy blue eyes. She was wearing black leather pants and high-heeled boots, a black corset that showed off way too much cleavage, an abundance of silvery jewelry, and bright red lipstick. It was all way overdone. She had a remote attractiveness to her, but I knew her type well, always trying to be queen bee and always failing. Never quite making cheerleader, never the prettiest, always reaching for the stars, and never escaping the gutters of her mediocrity. The sort to blame others, to use others, to steal power, to always take, never give. There was a cold intensity to her, an aura of power that magnified her natural presence. She looked from me to Trixie back again. I don't know what she told you, but stay out of this, she demanded. It's not your business. Merely a lover's quarrel. To Trixie, she said, it's time to come home. Though the bond Trixie and I now shared, I felt Eleanor tugging at those strings, trying to influence her. They strummed with conditioned power. Trixie stiffened, her eyes pleading with me even as she tensed to take a step. I saw the wicked way in which Eleanor had ensnared her, a delicate tangle of emotional and psychological ties bolstered with magic. I saw how she teased the strands, imposing her will. I'm afraid it's not as easy as that, I told Eleanor. Trixie's rejected you and your hold over her. Trixie? Eleanor's laugh was an amused bark, derisive and contemptuous. So you don't know who she really is? Who her father is? Why, is he just a perfect little helper? Don't you know anything? I could if I wanted. Trixie's soul lay bare to me. It would be the simplest of things to rummage through her mind and memories, to betray her trust, to disrespect her privacy. I had already seen and learned so much, but only what Trixie wanted to share. Can't say that it's pertinent under these circumstances, I said, with a shrug. She says her name is Trixie, and she very definitely wants nothing more to do with you. A slow smile blooming on my lips, I used Trixie's power, reaching out and severing Eleanor's hold. The strings connecting them snapped, one by one. Trixie's gasp was one of relief. Eleanor's cry was one of disbelief. She jerked with backlash. The tension between them vanished in a second. Frankly, I don't think much of your hobbies, I continued. You bitch! Eleanor spat out. She gathered up her own stored power and focused it. I felt the waves of anger sweeping towards me, a spear of pure hate speeding towards my heart. You goddamn fucking Nick! I brought both my hands up swiftly, blocking the attack with a shield created from borrowed magic. Promptly lashing out, slicing Eleanor with a compulsion of my own. If you can't say anything nice, I threatened, be glad I didn't let you finish whatever hateful shit was about to really piss me off. Eleanor turned her baleful gaze on the two of us, magic crackling feverishly on the air as she readied another strike. I took Trixie's hand. Her next attack flowed through us, dissipating harmlessly as I grounded it. Together, it was child's play for us to follow the trail back to its source, drawing out the rest of Eleanor's power, draining her. Just for good measure, I wrapped Eleanor in several layers of Gisa and compulsion, preventing her from ever touching the magic again, barring her from exploiting anyone else. Empty, helpless, crying tears of silent fury, she stumbled backwards, falling to the ground in a heap. I released Trixie's hand, crouching before Eleanor. You can be a better person, you know. This is unworthy of you. Now that you can't steal anyone else's power, You have to find some way of standing on your own and doing things honestly. I can help. She glared balefully and reared back, lips pursed as if to spit in my face. I sealed them with a simple tap of a finger to her mouth. She spluttered instead. Then again, maybe you need a cooling off period first. I sighed, standing again. I wove one last spell around Eleanor, a compulsion to go home and remain there for 24 hours. I unsealed her lips but warned her, the silence will last until you get home. Consider it my way of making sure you behave yourself. I glanced over. Trixie, do you have anything to say to Eleanor before we send her on her way? Trixie stalked over to deliver a rousing slap, leaving Eleanor's cheeks stinging in red. We are so through. She gave me an amused look. Anything more would be unworthy of me, like you say. She's defanged. Get rid of her. Just a little sorry that it'd come to all this, I activated the spells I set on Eleanor. Red handprint still blazing on her cheek, she stiffly turned, marching over to her car, a battered blue Volvo with a license plate witchy. Subtle, I thought. She probably wanted to change that. She peeled out at top speed, leaving Trixie and me behind. Now what? Trixie asked. In the east, the sun was starting to poke over the horizons. I go back and pretend I was actually in the office all night until the day manager gets in. Then I get some sleep. You should sleep also. It's been a hell of a long night for all of us. Trixie looked at me thoughtfully. And that's it? I nodded. That's it. Tell me how to give back your power and it's all yours, every last drop. I watched her relax and smiled. Like I told you, don't need it, don't want it. So that's how things played out. She took my hands, and I poured every ounce of magic back into her, the energy and knowledge rushing out of me like a drained water tank. As we did so, I made a little tweak to things, showing her how to control and wield her own magic, so she'd never be at the mercy of others again. The process left me near exhausted, and it was a real effort keeping awake until the next shift came on duty. Trixie was already asleep in my bed by the time I joined her. I curled around her and slept like the dead for the next few hours. When I awoke, the bed was empty, and had been for a while. There was a note waiting for me on the dresser. Joanna, I'm leaving Puck's Hill for a while. Now that I'm free of Eleanor, it's time to rebuild my life. No offense, but I'd rather be far from you as well until I figure out. I need to do this on my own. Don't be upset. I took just enough money for a bus ticket like you offered. I'll pay it back when I'm able. Wish me luck. And please, take care of yourself. Don't be so lonely. Trixie. I don't know where she went or what happened to her next. I don't know her real name, and I've never tried to figure it out, despite the hints. To me, she'll always be Trixie. I hope she's happy and in control of her life. I've seen Eleanor a few times since. She comes to the property line of the Starlight Motel and stares at the office. There's a longing in her expression that I know well. She always turns away and walks away again. One day she'll make up her mind. She will come seeking help or revenge. It's anyone's guess. I guess I'll find out on the day she comes in with an open hand or a loaded gun. Either way, it'll be an interesting night.
And there you have it. Was it good for you? Tell me what you think by calling the voicemail line, sending me an email, or finding me on Twitter. All those ways to contact me are over on the podcast website at nobilis.libsyn.com. And now I have the coupon code for you. Use Puck's Hill Preview, that's PUXHILL PREVIEW, to get 50% off Puck's Hill by Night when you buy it on the Circlet Press website at circlet.com. You have been listening to the Nobilis Erotica podcast. Theme and incidental music are used under license from Digital Juice. This podcast is released under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives license. Until next time, listen hard.